Hello, y'all. So, if I asked you, how did you spend your random Sunday night? I would assume it would be along the likes of I spent time with my family, I spent time with my friends, maybe watched some Sunday night football. And you know what? Those are completely fine answers. Those options sound like time really well spent. But if you were to ask me how I spent this random Sunday night, I decided to watch the ultimate tank bowl that was the Brooklyn Nets versus the Washington Wizards. If I'm being honest, I'm not sure what really propelled me to watch this game. I'm sure some of you weren't even aware that this game existed. And for good reason, both of these teams on paper are some of the worst teams in the entire association, entering this matchup with a record of 1-11. But something about it, and I was like, you know what? Why the heck not? I guess that's what it essentially boiled down to. And don't get me wrong, this game was very entertaining for the most part. You know, some intriguing notions of this game popped up from time to time, and ultimately it ended with Brooklyn being the victor in somewhat decisive fashion. Although this game was tightly contested, after the end of the third quarter, the Nets decided to lock in the fourth. They pretty much created several significant runs, they rode on that momentum, and in the end, won the game by double digits. And if I'm being honest, this didn't really surprise me that much, at least in terms of vibes that I felt from the past couple of days. It felt like Brooklyn's intensity was getting more apparent by the second, at least more than Washington's. Brooklyn came off a very close loss to the Orlando Magic, and you could make the argument that if Franz Wagner didn't go Super Saiyan in the final moments of the clutch, then the Nets would have won that game somewhat convincingly. Whereas for Washington, I don't really feel the same energy. The last tight contest they were in was that overtime thriller against the Pistons, and since then it just felt like so much of their soul has been crushed. I don't remember any other games where they put up much of a fight. When you combine all of that with the fact that Michael Porter Jr. put up 34 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, a near triple-double, alongside Claxton's 17 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists, yeah, Brooklyn winning this one wasn't too much of a shock. And before we get into how Brooklyn won this game, I first want to go over Washington. Man, this is kind of a sad state because first off, not only was Cam Thomas not in this game due to a hamstring injury, this loss pretty much marked their 11th straight, or is it 12th straight? 11 for 12, whatever it is. They're on a massive losing streak, kind of resembling the no-loss November from the previous season. And I already made a video on the previous channel about my complaints with the Wizards and the state of that team. And I was hoping that ever since that uploaded, at least like a few things should change, hopefully. However, that's not really the case. It seems like nothing changed. So many of the negatives that I brought up were also pretty apparent in this game. Trey Johnson is still coming off the bench. Offense, my goodness, it is so stagnant. I'm still not a fan of how most of the roster has been utilized. And the cherry on top, AJ Johnson, garbage time minutes. At this point, just free my guy, man. Free him. Actually, speaking on their offense, I want to dive into that for a second. I am not kidding you when 90% of their offensive sets was for them to give the ball to their bigs, whether it was Sarr or Bagley. Mostly Bagley because Sarr was dealing with foul trouble. He already had 5 fouls in the third quarter. But once they handed the ball off to the big at the top of the key, Bagley would just try to search for a teammate running off the screen. Doesn't matter which side because it's pretty much the same action with similar, less effective results. And eventually once they get off of that screen on either the left or right side, Bagley hands the ball off to them in like a dribble handoff, and then it will be up to the players to do whatever. Like there's just no certain direction that this strategy is going for. Kind of just feels like the players on the right and left sides are just moving around for the sake of moving around instead of moving around with a certain purpose. Doesn't matter who is coming off of the handoffs. Koulibaly, Kispert, Johnson, Whitmore, Carrington. As stated in my Wizards rant, very similar actions. In fact, I think it's the same one. Well, not every set that they run is the same, but for the most part, having the big set a quick handoff and either a 3 or a drive or a fadeaway, just whatever offensive shot is put up, it will always just lead to inefficient results because it's just never good offense. It's always the same thing. It's always predictable. And the thing is, Brooklyn is not really the right matchup for this strategy. Say what you want about them, but for some parts of their season, they have shown that they're not really slouches on the defensive end. Jordi Fernandez has shown how capable he is in terms of defensive efficiency. Like you could see it on the court. Players are always hedging screens, being very physical. Guys like Terrence Mann will always be pressuring them, and if the ball handlers get past, then Claxton or Clowney will be waiting for them. But despite that, I have seen no adjustment from Coach Keefe. They still run the same dribble handoff action. Maybe a couple of players get lucky with their isolation possessions because that's what it boils down to after Brooklyn successfully denies whatever initial plan Washington was going for. but for majority of these plays, it's just really bad. I mean, I recently watched Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets cruise through the Minnesota Timberwolves. Just going from that game yesterday to this is such a whiplash. And I can't believe I'm saying this, Washington has to thank CJ McCollum for tonight, because if it weren't for him, this game would not have been close. Sure, Keyshawn George was the leading scorer and he was getting shots up, don't get me wrong. He's still killing it, but he was also alongside Sarr dealing with foul trouble. It's actually crazy that I think about it, that those two players had 9 fouls combined in the third quarter. But CJ McCollum, he decided to get in his bag, nail a couple threes, mainly keep Washington afloat. He was successful for the most part. This was one of the few times where McCollum acted like a proper vet, and the game was within 1. But that was near the end of the third, I believe with like 3 or 2 minutes left. And then when CJ needed his rest, when he sat down on the bench, all chaos broke loose, and in a bad way for Washington. Brooklyn went on a huge run and they extended the lead back to 10, which is just more proof that this would not have been close if it weren't for the veteran point guard. Like, it was bad. And speaking of bad, their defense as well. Because Sarr was dealing with tons of foul trouble, they were missing that rim protection. Marvin Bagley especially, he was the victim of 2 Gortat screens. And credit to Day'Ron Sharpe, he opened up so much space for the drivers to get the layups in. But my goodness, it was just bad interior defense. And not just the backup bigs that weren't doing that well, it was also the rest of the roster in terms of tracking their man. A big portion of Brooklyn's offense is giving the ball to their bigs and having them find the cutters. And if you think, well, wait a minute, doesn't that sound similar to what you just talked about with Washington a second ago? I would say on paper, yeah, but Brooklyn's execution is much better. It's seriously night and day in terms of off-ball movement. I don't know how many times Washington fell victim to a backdoor cut, but it's definitely up in the double digits. They even gave up way too many and ones for my liking because guys like Carrington or Whitmore lost track of whoever they were guarding. And also to put a point of emphasis on the difference between the two offensive schemes, Brooklyn's bigs are much more capable at initiating actions than Washington's bigs are. Not to mention when Washington's bigs gets the ball, they just stop. They're supposed to stop at the top of the key and just look for people. And that's it. Whereas with Claxton or Sharpe, they are much better passers, much better screeners, and they have a better sense of what's going on around them. I believe Brooklyn also went 40% approximately from 3-point range, which just shows how effective this Nets offense was against this terrible Wizards defense. And some of these defensive miscues were so bad because Brooklyn's penetration, it wasn't like all of them was directly inside the paint. Some of them didn't even get that far. It was just one step into the arc and then a simple kick-out pass and the rest is history. Like I was talking about in my Wizards video, that it felt like the writing was on the wall for Coach Keefe's time in Washington. It's not just the fact that they are losing, it's the fact that the development is not progressing one bit. The fact that I still find these same issues several games later after I posted that video is highly concerning. There was that brief stint where Trey Johnson was starting, and then as soon as I decided to rewatch the Wizards again, he's coming off the bench. So again, I really want to cheer this Wizards team. I have loved what Will Dawkins has done in terms of what he's been left with, so it just pains me that I can't really find much opportunity or incentive to keep cheering on this Wizards team. Like, I seriously want to, but from what I've seen, why should I go back? Why should I rewatch this Wizards team if they're not going to develop Trey Johnson properly, if the offense has no purpose? Sure, Bilal Coulibaly is back and he's been one of the few positives, I would say. His defense is for real. He had a couple of nice slam dunks too, caught me by surprise. So yeah, his return was very heartwarming to see, but that's still not enough to change my opinion on this Wizards team. So all in all, you have to fire Coach Keefe. The sooner the better. Like, no pun intended, you just gotta bite the bullet. You look at what Detroit has done and where they're at now. Sure, Detroit gave that horrific contract to Monty Williams, although shout out Monty for getting that back. But once they realized that things aren't working, they decided to cut their losses. They found out a quality head coach was on the market in Coach Bickerstaff, and look where they're at now. I feel like Washington is in a very similar position, although I don't think that type of leap is going to happen anytime soon. If you look at what's available in the coaching market, you have some great guys available. Thibodeau, Malone, Jenkins, and sure, Thibodeau and Malone, probably prefer them to be on a contending team. But if I'm Will Dawkins, I am going to be heavily invested in what Taylor Jenkins can bring to this Wizards team. We've seen what he can do with Memphis. Sounds like no other teams have him on his radar. I feel like bringing him in will be the best chance. For an extremely young team like this, you need to have some sort of identity, some sort of culture, direction, whatever term that you feel like fits best, because none of that is available here. And then we transition to Brooklyn side of things. First off, big congrats. You guys were the better team. You definitely deserve to win this game. And I have to give more kudos to them for the offensive execution. I talked about previously how they were just slicing and dicing Washington on the inside. They had several guys contribute from three-point land as well. I mentioned Michael Porter Jr. as the main guy, but others stepped up. Noah Clowney, Tyrese Martin, I loved what I saw from them, especially Tyrese Martin. Overall, Tyrese ended the game with 20 points, 8 of 12 from the field. Like, there was this one three-pointer where he stepped in and took it with tons of confidence. Like, usually that's not a shot you would want him to take, but he took it and made it, and I was like, dang. Kind of like that Shaq meme. I have to apologize, I wasn't familiar with their game that much. And Noah Clowney, 12 points, all of them from threes, 1 steal, 1 block. If we want to talk about the most encouraging player on each team, my selection for Brooklyn would easily be Noah Clowney. Because yes, Claxton, Sharp, Cam Thomas, and PJ, they've all had their moments, but Clowney, man, I'm telling you, he has the makings to be a very, very solid player. Now, I don't think he's going to be any all-star, but I do think he can be somewhat of a very enticing project player. When we talk about what he can provide on offense and defense, on defense, he can rack up some blocks and be somewhat of an intimidating inside presence, and on offense, this is where I'm the most excited for. Because already in his early years, you can see Coach Fernandez place an emphasis on Clowney to work on his shooting, but there's also been a couple moments where not only has he been driving well, but he's also been handling the ball and making some nice decisions. Now, I do want to point out this is not a main focal point that has been happening every single game. It's just in few spurts, like those tiny flashes. While it may not be consistent, it makes you go, ooh, there's something there. Like, that is some exciting stuff. And if you add the hypothetical of his three-pointers finally being consistent, then I can see him being a great all-around player and someone that the Nets can put in for their future plans. But anyways, that's my take on this tank ball. Did not expect to talk about this as much as I would have thought, but this was still really fun. Maybe not for Wizards fans. Yeah, this is... No, it's bad. It's pretty bad. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you guys think of this tank game, any other teams or games that you thought interesting. Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.